This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
A look at the future of the Memphis Airport tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. We're joined tonight by Scott Brockman, newly appointed CEO and President of the Memphis Shelby County Airport Authority. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And Bill Dries, senior reporter with the Memphis Daily News. We'll talk the whole time about the airport, the past and the future, but let me just start with the question of assess the financial health of the airport right now after a kind of painful dehubbing that was, I guess, a financial impact to the airport, obviously very frustrating to a lot of flying folks. What is the financial health of the airport right now?
The airport authority is extremely strong financially. It's the model that we have is one that's very resilient, has worked through a number of challenges, including the bankruptcy of both Northwest and Delta back in 2007, 2008 economic downturns. And so financially we're very strong. Balance sheet is extremely strong. The way airports, at least the way Memphis Airport's finances work, is what's called a residual agreement with our airline partners, our airline operators. And so it's a closed system, if you will, wherein they guarantee that we will always collect enough revenue to pay for the operations. The challenge then becomes, what do those charges, how high do the charges get in order to manage the facility, and can you still then attract airlines and grow airlines in an environment with raising rates?
And so even with Delta having cut, I don't know what the peak with Northwest was, 300 flights a day or some, high 200s. Delta's down to 40 flights a day, give or take, something
about
like
50, yeah,
about
49,
50.
yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Even then, financially, the airport works.
Oh, absolutely,
yeah.
And it will continue to work. It really, what ends up happening though is the balance of what the rates and charges become over a short-term period or even over a longer-term period. So,
but from then switch from a passenger point of view. I mean, the frustration of Delta cutting back. I mean, you hear that, the airport authority heard that. Was the airport authority doing enough? You were, I think, the number 2 at that time. But do you feel like you did everything you could to keep to keep Delta here? I mean, could you look back and think, well, we should have done this or that to keep a bigger presence of Delta flights?
No, I think, the process, if you go back to when Delta first started to eliminate flights, okay, it took about 3 years to get to this point. If you look at the Pittsburgh model with U.S. Airways, effectively, at 11:45 in the evening on the eve of the expiration of an airline use and lease agreement with Pittsburgh Airport, the CEO called and said, we're not renewing the lease and we're moving. And so they shut that hub down effectively overnight.
Yeah.
In our case, we still garnered the benefit of all of those flights as they weaned down slowly. So while it was painful for the traveling public and certainly painful for the management team, as we look to try to rebuild that service, it did take a very long time to get from the start to the finish, and so, which gave us a chance to work with other carriers, i.e. Southwest, Frontier, to poise them to start service as that model worked better for them. So really, it was a longer period of time than one would have expected.
Yeah, Bill.
It is the latest airport authority figures that I saw indicated that our origin and destination traffic, O&D, is now the bulk. Is that still the case for the flights coming into the airport and leaving the airport?
What we've done, yes, so they are, and currently origin and destination traffic is running at about 75% of the total passengers. So,
And let's define that for a second, just for people, we're pretty close to this. That's flights that originate here, basically Memphians or people from the region getting on a plane and going somewhere from here, versus when we were a hub, you had a lot of traffic that just passed through. People going
What
from
we call
Seattle on the way to
transfer-
Tampa or something like
Yeah,
that. Okay, so
transfer
O&D,
passengers.
back to, just to define that. So back to you.
yes, and so prior to now, back when we had the robust hub, we were running at about 65 to 70% transfer passengers, people getting off one plane on another, had no business in Memphis, did not live here or have business here. That's reversed now, and so we're now at 75% origin and destination, 25% still transferring from one flight to the next. And so that model is different than what it was before. We're now generating our flight base on what Memphis business and Memphis leisure travelers are looking to fly. And so it's a much more stable flight model for the future. And so the O&D passengers are the ones that actually spend the most amount of money at the airport. They park, they rent cars, they buy more food and gifts.
And is
so,
that number, compare that number, of O&D passengers, again, sort of Memphians, give or take, in and out, now to, I don't know, 2007, pre-recession? I mean, because you got to go, apples and apples. Is it a consistent number, or is it down from where it was when we were a hub? Is the O&D number down from where it was?
it's down, I think it's down from the pre-recession,
Okay.
which really had nothing to do, per se, as much with the hub as it does the economy.
Yeah.
And it's down about 10%. But what we've seen is that as airlines, low-cost airlines have brought in service, Southwest specifically, what we've seen is that O&D traffic is rising this month, this year, over this month last year.
Okay.
So that trend is going up to the extent that the first month that Southwest operated, a full month was, well, 3/4 of a month was August. It was up 20-something% O&D traffic.
Yeah.
It's been up every month since Southwest started, so that's a good sign.
Yeah.
There's now inspiration for local travelers with more reasonable fares to travel.
Do you think that that's going to remain the case? In other words, is O&D's dominance something that the airport authority builds on from this point, or do you think connecting traffic and the transfers will come back to some degree as a percentage?
No, and the reason for that is that the focus, Memphis' focus now with Delta and everyone else, is on the O&D market. The flights are geared around the demand for the O&D market. And so, and as we go forward, our relentless pursuit of frequent and affordable air service will be geared around that O&D market. And so what I would expect is actually the O&D to continue to rise as a percentage, not because there's a tremendous change in transfer passenger availability. It's that we're going to grow the market. We have currently, the Memphis market is the O&D market is a challenge because of airfares. So we don't truly know what the demand of the O&D market is, okay? And so it's been disincentivized, if you will, by high airfares. So as we interject more and more low-fare carriers, which we will over time, then we will continue to grow that O&D market. And more of Memphians and the people in the Mid-South will be able to travel. And then we will truly see what that O&D market is and take advantage of that.
There was the day that U.S. Airways and American, that the merger went through, the Justice Department signed off on it.
Correct.
Delta was right out of the gate, no pun intended, saying we want the Reagan National slots that U.S. Airways had, which we have some service from U.S. Airways between us and Reagan National. And they said, we want that, even though the Justice Department had made it clear that they wanted those slots to go to low-cost carriers. What is the outlook for that Washington service that Memphis International has as a result of that merger? And do you think Delta should be able to take those slots
Well, the first thing is the U.S. Airways service to Reagan National is right now they're running 4 frequencies a day, and they're doing, by their own admission, doing fairly well on those. We started with 3, went to 4. Demand has been good and solid, and with the merger, they have been part of the trade-off of the merger was they have to give up slots, if you will, or take off and landing positions. And so I believe the final number was 49. And so the jockeying, if you will, that occurs is everyone trying to get into the pieces of where those slots get allocated. We think we're in a very strong position to maintain most, if not all, 3, at least 3, if not 4. And we continue to put our case forward for that. As for Delta, the whole reason why the Justice Department looks at those routes is to make sure that there's not a shifting and that there's not cities eliminated. And part of what U.S. Air served with those routes was smaller communities. And so the question will be, is Delta really going to benefit the national aviation system, or what carrier will? And quite frankly, I would not, I don't know what the Justice Department will determine. That's something that occurs outside of this conversation, but I would expect that the majority of those slots are going to go somewhere else because Delta had those slots and they switched them with U.S. Airways in their LaGuardia versus National, Reagan National trade.
When you talk about the cutbacks and the shifting, and this is a little bit out of Memphis, but part of what Delta was flying through Memphis were a lot of flights from, I mentioned Seattle to Tampa, but say, it's not a good example, but cities the size of Jackson, Mississippi, smaller airports around the country, and we talked a little bit about this before the show, who've really taken it hard. I mean, people look at what happened to Memphis and the loss of flights, and it's been really difficult. Right. It's nothing compared to what has happened across the country in these smaller size cities, big communities, right? I mean, that's where huge cuts have taken place.
The Lubbock, Texas, and the Lexington, Kentucky,
Knoxville,
and
Tennessee
Knoxville,
size,
yes,
places.
The small hub airports that are running, less than 750,000 enplanements a year, which is a person getting on a plane. Those airports have taken the biggest reduction in service, mainly because their feed was to Memphis.
Yeah.
That's how they got there. And so they've lost flight availability, they've lost flight frequencies, and so it's been very challenging.
And correct me if I'm wrong, that's part of why Pinnacle, I mean, there were a lot of reasons that Pinnacle went under and those regional carriers, but that was part of the problem with the Pinnacle model, right? I mean, that was a major disappointment in Memphis in a number of ways. They moved downtown, they were going to be a big employer downtown, a lot of fanfare associated with Pinnacle, but then they went bankrupt and basically moved up to Minneapolis or wherever they moved. Yeah. Was that part of it? The cuts in mid-sized city service?
Well, it becomes more fundamental than that. Okay. The reason why those cuts were made were those flights were based upon a aircraft that doesn't work in today's model.
Okay.
And that is a 50-seat RJ that is fairly expensive from a standpoint of fuel consumption and operations.
Right.
And so when those aircraft came into the market, fuel was at about $30 to $35 a barrel, okay? And now fuel is at $100 a barrel. So it has gone up 3 times. During the peak of the downsizing decisions, fuel got as high as $145 a barrel. Part of the other challenge is that the cost of gasoline for you and I is about 25% more for an airline because that gasoline you and I buy has to be refined further into jet fuel. It's called the crack spread. So airlines are paying 25% more per gallon than you and I are. So that RJ aircraft is being eliminated from a lot of fleets, and so that is what eliminated a lot of small markets because they don't have enough people.
And so, but even in that context of everything, the challenges you're talking about, you've mentioned other small carriers. Didn't Frontier is coming into Memphis, if I'm not mistaken?
Frontier starts in March of 2014.
And then there's some other ones that you all are talking to. Why do those work when Delta didn't work, when Pinnacle and the regional carriers, what's the difference between, that makes those small, especially discount airlines viable in Memphis?
Well, in the case of Southwest, they're running all 737 aircraft. So it's a difference of if it's a 737-700, which is nominally 140 passengers, versus a 50-passenger plane. That new generation 737 uses exponentially almost the same amount of fuel as an RJ. Okay,
with
from a standpoint of fuel
three
burn,
times the
with three times the passengers. So you can spread that cost. I mean, it's a little bit more for fuel, but and so a Frontier, who runs also a similar size, a larger aircraft, 737, is going to carry passengers from Memphis to Denver and to their hub, so they can then transfer in Denver and reach to the West Coast on Denver's hub. Other carriers that we are courting run similar type operations. A Spirit airline. Okay, Spirit runs larger aircraft and runs to Fort Lauderdale and other destinations. So we're talking to them. JetBlue is a little bit of a different story because they run larger RJ aircraft. They run the 100-seat, 120-seat aircraft, but they're the next generation aircraft. So they're the new ones. The fuel burn is totally different.
So for a flyer, be it a business traveler or a leisure traveler, it is a big change. I mean, when I first moved to Memphis 15, 20 years ago, you just go to the Northwest site, nwa.com, or call them up, and you could get anywhere. You flew direct,
right.
And there wasn't another choice because there were some other airlines here, but they were never necessarily cheaper, and they usually didn't have you could fly any time of day. I mean, the service was amazing. Is part of it just the cold reality of connecting flights, of having to shop around on multiple different websites, of having to be it's a more difficult experience to figure out what airline you're going to be on, and on any given trip you might fly a different airline. It's very different than the way it was 10 years ago, and that's not going to change.
Tremendously different, and the benefit of the hub was roughly 90 nonstop destinations. So you got on a plane in Memphis, you could go pretty much anywhere in the world and even the globe with Amsterdam, and with the new O&D, we're going to have 30 to 35 destinations. And so the new reality is you will connect. The benefit is you will get lower fares.
Because they're all competing
less
against
convenience,
each other.
but lower fares. And so so you will be able to, more, it will open up the travel opportunities to more people in the community.
Quick thing, you mentioned international. We lost the Delta flight, Delta KLM flight. Is there any prospect of getting a European flight in the near future?
I believe that we have opportunities that we can have charters to start with. What we have to do is rebuild that service, okay? The reason why the KLM service and then Northwest service to Amsterdam worked was you had a hub on the European side and a hub on the Memphis side.
Right.
So you had 25% of the people that got on that plane were origin and destination. The other 75% came from everywhere else.
Right.
Whether they were European connections or domestic connections in the United States, it was the hub benefit. With an O&D model now, we have to build a different process. So now what we're looking at is scheduled charter service, okay? Because of people in Europe that want to get to Memphis, people in Memphis that want to get to Europe, and you then have to marry those routes up in a pre-planned charter.
Because the airlines we're talking about, in terms of Frontier, Southwest, Spirit, those are not, they don't have international flights, at least European long-haul flights. Okay, Bill.
And that's domestic. One other thing that the game has changed tremendously because the legacy carriers, American, Delta, those carriers have websites and have bookings through travel agents and others. The new carriers, the Southwest of the world, you can only book through their website. You can't go on Expedia.
Yeah, that's part of what I was getting at, and thank you for making that more clear. You have to go to multiple different sources, multiple different browser windows, and
you
so on.
need to know how to get there. Part of what my goal is, and it's a good bridge here, is we're going to focus on what I call a positively memorable travel experience. Memorable is MEM, which is our moniker. And part of what I want to offer to the traveling public is a link on our website to a flight guide that gets you to every available flight, okay? You pick the destination. It tells you all the airlines and the flight times. So now you can find, and we'll get there. We're not there yet. We have to build the model. but we will get there and it'll be on our website. And
Yeah.
when we get there, you then will find the flight you want to take, then research backwards to the airline.
Yeah.
You're not beholden to try to know all of these things. We're going to try to help you provide that information.
Is that a model that other airports have, or is that something unique? I guess part of the evolution of where air travel is going.
Well, no, there are other airports that have had to reinvent themselves, okay, who have done this, and so we're not the first to do this, and we're building these things. The problem is part of that is we've been in the process of doing an information technology master plan and trying to rebuild all of the infrastructure at the same time, and so it takes a little bit of, it's been delayed a little bit, but we'll get there very quickly.
Right, and before the dehubbing, the airport authority approved an incentive plan. I think it was a pool of about $1 million. I think I've got it's been a while since I've looked at the number. How has that pool of funding worked in terms of alluring the kind of air carriers that you want? Obviously, we've got Southwest and Frontier is coming on. Are those incentives still out there? How popular are they proving? Have you had to tweak them in any way?
The original program, you're right, the $1 million was the entire program funding. The maximum any airline could get based upon the number of flights was $500,000 per year. And so, and the program has been very successful. We have the Southwest operations, Frontier. What it does is that incentive is not going to, in and of itself, start air service. It gives an airline a chance to offset some of those startup costs. It is very expensive to come into a new market. And so what we do is help them with some of those startup costs, especially with marketing, with advertising in a co-op. And so I would look for us to continue that. We will need to address that matter with our board in the future. But I believe that we will continue that program because it's the right thing to do for the community to continue to grow that frequent, affordable air service.
Just about 4 minutes left. In other projects that have been started, the Ground Transportation Center, the big parking garage that has the rental cars in it now, there was some criticism as the dehubbing started that, oh, well, now we're going to be stuck with this giant garage and this rental car facility that we don't need because we have so many fewer flights. Yeah. Financially, the Ground Transportation Center is working?
The Ground Transportation Center is just wildly successful from a standpoint of its model. It was funded in a very creative way, which meant that there was very little debt service to cover. We have to park 54 cars a day in that 7-story, 4,500 space structure to break even. That's 54 spaces above what we had before. We're now up to, every month has been above that number. We're now up to some 1,300 more spaces in that facility. It's been wildly successful. It is a tremendously efficient facility. Spaces are wide. It's easy to get in and out of. Right. And the traveling public so far, for the most part, has loved it. Any new facility has glitches.
But some of the offsite parking have closed, I guess, in response to that. Maybe they weren't as competitive or they didn't offer the convenience. So a couple of offsite places. Didn't the airport authority buy one of the locations? Am I right about that?
We did. We bought Park It Here, which is on the corner of Airways and Winchester.
Are there plans for that?
Yes, and we'll actually, the reason why we bought it was because it fits very well for us to put our rental car storage and maintenance. Rental cars were all on Democrat. They're combined facilities where storage, maintenance, and customer service. The rental cars are now in the Ground Transportation Center, the first 2 floors, so they have their primary operations on site. They need an efficient place to do oil changes, simple maintenance, storage. That site is a perfect site and much closer, which then allows Democrat for a higher and better use, which might be our super partners in Federal Express. So.
And we're just a couple minutes left, and I do want to get to FedEx. But the other thing, the tarmac's being rebuilt around the B concourse.
The B concourse now, yes.
That project still makes sense, even though Delta's not in there.
It is an absolutely critical project because that is 50-year-old pavement. That is. It becomes a safety issue with what we call.
So maintenance goes on even though there are these changes because they're long term. And I'm cutting you off a little just because we're short on time. Has there been any talk, and I don't know if I made this up or I read this somewhere, about consolidating some of the gates because there aren't as many flights going through there, so that and everything is a little bit sprawling and a little empty feeling. Are there efficiencies or even psychological reasons to consolidate a little bit because there just aren't as many flights going through, and you just don't have to walk all the way up to B45 when all those gates in between aren't being used?
All the above. We are doing a terminal utilization study to look at our total gates that we need to have today is about 30. Okay. We have about 75, 79 in the terminal. So clearly we can focus. The Apron project has caused a disruption in that study.
Because that's closer in, so if you don't realize it when you're walking way out to B45, you're walking by all this construction.
It's all dirt right now, so you can't park a plane there. But clearly, what we're studying is the efficiency, cost savings of putting everyone in one area, benefit for our concessionaires, and then looking at how do we make that all work for the benefit of the long term. And there'll be great things on the horizon, trust me.
We can talk about FedEx for 20 minutes. We have 45 seconds. FedEx is, they've gone through a lot of consolidations, a lot of changes in their business model. How is FedEx's presence? I assume it's still as important as ever at the airport? Even
more so, because as the passenger airlines have downsized, their footprint of what they're paying for has gone down. FedEx pays for more. Cargo is up. Okay, year to date, fiscal year to date, calendar year to date, cargo remains strong, and we'll do everything and anything we can do to support their business model because they are critical to the economy of this region. All right. Well, we will leave it there. Thank you for joining us. Okay. Thank you, Bill, and thank you for joining us. Join us again next week. Good night.